Fusion Mobile, quality e-learning experience on the go.
You're welcome once again to Fusion Mobile e-learning platform. My name is Jacob, and today we'll be looking at the study session in economics under public finance. Before knowing what public finance, we will look at what brought about this issue, why the public and the finance, where they come from. You know, in a society, definitely, in an economy, definitely, like we studied once before, that there will be some parts that are controlled by the private sector, while some are controlled by the government or the state. The part that is controlled by the private individuals is referred to as the private sector, while the parts of the economy or the set of activities carried out by the state or the government is referred to as the public sector. Now, certain activities that need to be discharged, or responsibility that should be discharged by the government, includes things like defense and general administration, economic activities, regulating economic activities like prices, maintenance of internal peace and security, and so on and so forth. But in order to actually discharge these things, there is always need there will be need for funds to be raised. So in other words, the idea of raising funds and using it to cater for these responsibilities is what we will be studying, and what is called public finance. But nevertheless, whatever things that will be looked at in public finance, whenever government is deciding on how to raise money, the government will also have to take cognizance of how the decision it is taking on either revenue or expenditure is affecting the entire economy. So in other words, public finance doesn't just look at how revenue is raised. It also looks at how it is spent, and also how it affects the economy in achieving the goals. So that brings us to the definition or meaning of public finance. Public finance has been defined as the study of government revenue and expenditure, and how these expenditure and revenue decisions are taken or affect the general system of the economy. Now, in other words, from there, public finance is divided into four. So we call them what? Components. Components of public finance. The components of public finance, we mentioned public revenue or government revenue. We look at what? Public or government expenditure. Expenditure, look at our financial administration. Then stability and growth. So in other words, what we are talking about is that the public government or government revenue talks about the various avenues through which government raise funds. And anytime these decisions are made, we should also know that it will be affecting another side of the economy, because these things, the finances that are being raised is not out of the blue, but from another side of the economy. So we should also look at, the government also looks at how these expenditure or revenue decisions affect the economy. So we'll be looking at what sources of revenue and sources of government expenditure. Then we'll be looking at the financial administration. Here talks about how this revenue is shared among the various responsibilities of the government. For instance, the government needs to maintain safety of internal safety and peace through, of course, through police and so on and so forth, or some other security agents. Now, the security agents needs to be paid, certain equipment needs to be bought. All those things are taken from what? The government revenue. Now, but how is the finances of government being what? Distributed among the component units or functional areas? Those are the things public finance also looks at. Then we talk about what? Stability and growth. For any time decisions on revenue and expenditure are being taken, that the utmost aim is to what? To encourage what? Economic growth and what? Economic stability in the economy. Now, that is an overview of what public finance is all about. Now let's look at the second part of it that talks about what? The objectives of public finance. The objectives of public finance. The objectives of public finance. Now, the objectives of public finance here, we are talking about what are the things, the activities of public finance as we have explained. What is the major aim of it? Why everything like that? Now, the major objectives of public finance have been classified into one: resource allocation, income distribution, price stability, balance of payment equilibrium, growth and development, then full employment. Now, the objectives of public finance. We have the first one: resource allocation, income distribution, price stability, balance of payment equilibrium, economic growth and development, full employment. Now let's look at those. When we talk about resource allocation, the general resources of the economy is generated or concentrated at a party, is gathered. Then from gathering that, it is supposed to be distributed according to the what? According to the responsibilities of each of the units. In Nigeria, we operate what we call fiscal federalism, where we combine both vertical and horizontal allocation systems. Vertical allocation is the case where the revenue generated from what? In the federation account is vertically divided or distributed among the various tiers of government, which are the federal, state, and local governments. While the horizontal allocation is distribution from different tiers of government to the component functions or state units of responsibility. Now, but if we're talking about income redistribution, that is being able to achieve redistribution of income, that means from where the areas of surplus, we move it to the areas of deficiency. That means being able to plan and distribute the income properly. Then the other one, price stability, is referring to what? The goal of being able to stabilize or maintain a fairly stable price. That means reducing inflation rates to the barest minimum. Usually, prices are stable when inflation is maintained at a rate of less than 7% now per annum. Now, the next one, balance of payments equilibrium. Balance of payments in itself talks about what? A comparison between the general, all the receipts from exports to all the expenditure on imports. Now, in such cases, the balance of payment equilibrium is looking at the equilibrium in the balance of payments is trying to make sure the objective is to make sure that that the economy is not running in a deficit, but it should be it should be aimed at achieving an equilibrium or even a surplus, as the case may be. That is why the economy finances certain functions. Then the next one is what? Economic growth and development. The economic growth is increase in the general or overall growth of the economy, or overall size or potential of the economy, okay, in the terms of resources or output or even income. So when we measure change in income, and there's what? An increase in income over a period of time, we say, or stock of resources, we say there's what? There's economic growth. But development is achieving a positive change in terms of infrastructure, better living standards, income equity, and so on and so forth in the economy. So without growth, we cannot talk about development. And the last one is what? Full employment. Full employment. Now, full employment does not really mean that unemployment is at 0%. It means that unemployment is kept below 3.5% of the population per annum. Now, in such cases, of course, there are situations unemployment cannot be put at 0%. So, but when it is kept below 3.5 or at 3.5, then we can assume that approximately a society has achieved full employment of resources. And this is the aim of what? Of the government making some administrative expenses, some economic expenses, investments, and so on and so forth. Now, that is that about objectives of public finance. Now we move down to the next one, which is the next one here. We have the what? Government revenue. And expenditure. Government revenue and expenditure. Now, we'll take the first one, government revenue, government or public revenue. Okay. Now, when we talk about government revenue tells us the total amount of revenue that accrues or is generated into the coffers or coffers of the the government at a particular point in a time. Now, at that point, at the point of this, when we talk about government revenue, there are different sources through there. It talks about the different ways through which the government is able to generate revenue over time. Okay, first there are quite many variants. We will list some of them. First one, majorly, is what? Taxes. Okay, through taxes the government raises revenue. 2, through fees and fines. 3, through licenses. Licenses. Okay, we talk about what? Through royalties paid by companies to the government. And 4, we will talk about what? Profits from government investments. We could talk about loans grants, and donations. Now this could make different sources of government revenue taken from different places. Now grants, aids, loans, and so on and so forth. You could talk about direct investments. Okay, now all these are examples of sources of government revenue. Each of them could be generated at different levels of the government, but they all accrue revenue to the government. Now the next part is looking at government expenditure. What are the various ways that government expenditure? And the various sources of government expenditure we have the various avenues of government expenditure. We have on defense, maintenance of internal peace and security, administrative expenses, social welfare expenditure, economic expenses, where we talk about administrative, servicing of loans. Now these are major cases. When we talk about these are things that in cases where these things increase, then it accounts for increments in government expenditure. For instance, the more the loans that a country collects, then the higher the volume of amount of money that is used, of revenue that is allocated to servicing of loans, which is either paying the interest and the principal at the same time. So it accounts for increase in government expenditure. Economic expenses, expenditure on economic activities. Economic activities could include, of course, the investment thing. It could include regulation of inflation, either by regulating prices, like what is happening in the stock market currently, where value is used to get the dollar and pumped into the stock market, so that the naira can gain more value. Now those are things that could be classified under economic activities. Also, we could also classify economic activities under maybe certain investments on organizations that is set up by the government. Now those ones are also, or even investments, involved. Then social welfare expenditure is expenditure on provision of infrastructure and other things that ensure better living for the people. Then the other one, administrative expenses. Administrative expenses. The administrative expenditure here refers to the amount of money spent on the administrative functions of government. For instance, the amount used to pay the functionaries, such as the ministers, the permanent secretaries, civil servants, and so on and so forth, the general executive and all functionaries of the government, just to make sure that that the policies are formulated, the country is moving forward. Then the next one, maintenance of internal peace and security, is one of the responsibilities of the government, and that makes it the responsibility of the public sector. And the last one, of course, is defense from external aggression, which the first and the second one deals with the armed forces. Now these are sources of government expenditure, and as it may, the major source of government revenue which is worthy of note is taxation. Now taxation, that is why we'll be looking especially at taxation. First things, we'll ask ourselves, what is tax? What is tax, and what is the difference between tax and taxation? Now, on a good day, the tax is referred to as a compulsory levy. So that's how some people define it. While some other people go further, that a tax is a compulsory levy on on economic units on which no immediate return is expected when made. What that means is that in some books where an author says that tax is a levy on economic assets, that is economic units, on which there is no quid pro quo. Quid pro quo. Quid pro quo. And the quid pro quo means that you don't expect anything in exchange of such. Immediately the payment is being made. So that is what a tax is. But now, taxation in its own is a whole system, or the whole process of this collection of tax and administration of tax laws, making sure that tax systems are fixed or formulated, tax policies are formulated, taxes are collected, and that tax laws are administered. So that is what talks about taxation. Now in taxation, when we look at the tax could the tax systems, when we talk about the tax systems, we also look at we look at certain concepts. I think we've talked about one, tax. We look at the tax rate. We look at the another thing, we call it tax base. We look at tax systems. Tax system. Now let's look at those ones first. We'll still write the other ones. Now when we talk about the tax, we've already said that it was the total amount or a compulsory levy paid by an entity or economic unit as a result of as a result of performing economic activities, and on which no immediate return is expected. That is a tax. Now, what is the tax rate? The tax rate is a proportion of the value of a tax base or income that is paid out as tax. Now, your tax rate is calculated as the tax over value of tax base, or income, multiplied by 100 over 1. So let's say that your income is 500,000 and tax is 25,000. So this means my tax rate will be calculated as this goes times 100 over 1. You have, so tax is 25,000, this is 500,000. So we have this goes with this. then 5 here is 2, in here is 1/20, that's what, 5%. So we have 5% is the tax rate when you pay 25,000 out of 500,000 as tax. Now what will be the tax base now? The tax base is actually the value of an item of expenditure on income, or income rather, on which tax is charged. I'll repeat that the tax base is the amount, the item of expenditure or income on which the value of which the value of tax is what? Based. So a value, that means a tax base is not necessarily the income you earn. It could be some expenditure you've made. It could be a capital gain. That's why you have different types or forms of a tax. Now the next one we have what? The tax systems. The tax system talks about the method by which what? The taxes are what? The taxes respond according to the what? The value of the tax base. That is talking about the what? The tax system. Now the tax system could be divided into 3. That is where we have the what? The progressive tax, the what? The regressive tax, tax, and the proportionate tax. The progressive tax talks about, the progressive tax system is a tax system whereby the rate of tax paid by an entity or an economic unit increases or goes higher as the value of his income or tax base increases. That means the higher the income, the higher the value of the tax rate, the higher the value, the tax rate. Okay, not the value of the tax paid, but the tax rates. For instance, a man at point A, total income is 500,000 and he pays 25,000. And when income increases to point 2 of 1 million, he pays 100,000. It's increased. Now, by the time we see this, the tax rate here is 5% when we calculate, while the tax rate here is what? 10%. From what we can see, that the value, this is the income, here is a tax. So the tax rate here is what now? 5% here, 10% here. Because income increased from 500,000 to 1 million, then he's now paying what? 100,000 as tax, because his income increased to 1 million. Meaning that what? The rate of tax he pays now increased. So this is what you could refer to as a progressive tax system. But now, where you have a regressive tax system, it is talking about a situation where the tax rate being paid is reduced. The tax rate drops as the value of your income or your tax base increases. Now, for instance, let's look at this. 500,000, he pays 25,000, and at 1 million, he still pays what? 25,000. Now, when we look at this, this is 5% tax, but here is 2.5%. As we can see, the higher this, the higher the tax, the income, the lower the tax rate, and that is what defines the regressive tax. But in a case where we have a proportionate tax system, which some books call it what? A digressive system, because it is digressive in nature. Now, what it means is that even though you pay equal tax rates, let's say he pays 50,000 as tax here. That means that this is still what, 5%. So from what we've seen before, that the the tax system is actually judged by the what? By the rate of tax that is paid, and not according to the amount of tax that is paid. Now, the other things we'll look at, we'll have to take a look at the tax evasion, tax avoidance, how we call what, tax holiday, and we have tax shifting and tax sharing. Now, some of these, for instance, we have the tax evasion and tax avoidance are two things. They are all refusal to pay taxes. But now, the tax evasion here, tax evasion, talks about the voluntary refusal of an entity or an individual or a unit to pay the tax that accrues to a particular economic activity it performs. Now, in such case, it means that he has actually enjoyed what the economic activity, but has refused to do or to pay the tax that is due, and such is referred to as what? Tax evasion. And it is, in cases, tax evasion is punishable under the provisions of the tax laws as administered by different states of the country. Now, but for tax avoidance is as the word goes, avoiding tax. That means the case where individual does not want to pay tax, the individual or the economic unit avoids performing a particular economic activity because it wants to avoid paying the tax that will be accrued or due to it. So in such case, this person that is in tax avoidance refuses to perform an economic activities and so does not pay the tax. But the other person carries out activities and refuses to pay the tax. So the first one is punishable while the second one is not. Now, the tax holiday is defined as a period within which companies or firms or units are allowed not to pay tax. Usually it is used as a strategy to encourage infant industries to do what? To grow up and establish, for more infant industries to also what? Be established. It is one of the strategies that could be used for encouraging industrialization. Now, tax shifting and tax sharing. Tax shifting talks about the movement of an entire tax burden from the point or from a particular unit or a particular agent down to another person, maybe from the producer up to the consumer. So the shifting of an entire tax burden is now the tax burden, we forgot to put that. The tax burden we are talking about is talking about the entire value of tax liability. That is that. And the last one we'll talk about here is what? Tax incidence. Tax incidence. And tax sharing is the distribution of the tax liability between among the different economic units, that's between the producers and consumers. And tax incidence is the final burden bearer or the final resting place of the tax burden, is what we call tax incidence. While the tax burden is the tax liability, the tax sharing is distribution of tax burden or tax liability, while tax shifting is the entire movement of the tax liability. Now, the nature of the tax shifting and tax sharing depends on the elasticity of demand. Now, if demand is elastic, for elastic demand, nature of tax sharing, or shifting. Now, when we talk about the tax shifting, nature of tax burden shifting or sharing depends on the word who determines who finally bears the burden of the tax, or the burden of tax that one party produces or the other. Now, when we look at this is a case where we have no tax. Here is demand, here is supply. Now, over here is the equilibrium price, which is the market price, and here is the equilibrium quantity, which is... Now, when tax is imposed on this price, on production, when tax is imposed on production, it means definitely that the supplier will come down here, and here becomes the what? The demand price, and here is the what? The supply price. Or rather, here is the demand price, and here is what? The supply price. Now, this whole place represents the tax burden. This whole shaded part represents the what? The tax. Now, when the tax now, it depends on the elasticity of demand of tax before we know what part of the tax that will be either shifted or shared. Now, the principle is this: the more elastic, from here to this place is paid by the what? By the producers, while from here, from here to here is paid by the suppliers or the producers, while here to here is paid by the what? While from this place to this point is paid by the consumers. So, as it is, when we have a unitary elastic demand, it means that equal proportion of the tax burden or the tax liability is shared among the what? The producers and the consumers, so they pay equal proportions. But where we have a perfectly elastic demand, it means that the whole tax burden lies on the what? On the producers. The whole tax burden lies on the producers. Let's look at this. This will be what I'm talking about. Now, here is the demand curve. This is the supply curve. This is another supply curve. So anything that happens here is paid. This whole tax here is paid by the what? By the producer, not the consumer. So the more elastic it becomes, the higher the tax liability on the producers or on the manufacturers. Now let's look at the other one. For perfectly inelastic demand, the whole tax liability falls on the consumers. Because over here, a perfectly inelastic is like this. So the supply here, 0.1, here, 0.2. So at this point, any increment on tax between here to here is taken by the what? The consumers, because the prices are the same. So now, from what we can see, the higher the what? The lower the elasticity, the higher the burden on the producers. While the higher the elasticity, the higher the burden on the what? On the producer. Which means that when we have a fairly elastic demand, we have more burden on the producers and less on the consumers. But when we have a fairly inelastic demand, when we have more burden on the consumers and less on the producers. Now that is talking about tax incidence, tax liability, and tax burden. Now we look at what? Principles of a good tax system. Principles of a good tax system. We have, number one, we have equity. 2, ability to pay. 3, convenience. 4, certainty. 5, economy. 6, flexibility, simplicity. 7, flexibility. 8, productivity. So principles of a good tax system, we have equity, ability to pay, convenience, certainty, economy, simplicity, flexibility, and productivity. Now, talking about each of these, equity talks about people. That means equity as in ability. When we say ability to pay, let's start with that. The ability to pay principle says that the tax that should be charged or should be levied on a particular asset or unit should be such that he has the ability to generate such tax. Now, in such case, it means that the ability to pay principle says that that the tax to charge should be according to the size of the income or size of the activity. But now equity says that the ability to pay, that means that equal taxes should be charged among equal people that have equal ability to pay. Let's say that everybody that earns 1 million naira should be charged equal taxes, or people that earn 50,000 should be charged equal. Just once people that have equal income brackets should all be charged equal. So that is what equity is saying, and ability to pay is saying being able to generate income to pay the tax. Then convenience says that the payment of tax should by no means affect the consumption pattern of the taxpayer, else it will lead to tax evasion. And the other one, certainty, means that the time of collection of tax should be certain. It should be certain that that the economic or the assets it is the time it is able to pay it, or it has generated the tax. Economy principle says that the principle of tax that says that that it should be able to generate certain values within the economy. That is, it should be something that the revenue from tax should have economic effect. And simplicity means that the tax rate or the tax system should be simple to understand, and the tax rate should be easy to calculate. Now the other one, flexibility, is that the tax system should not be rigid. It means it has to be as you graduate from one level of income to another, you should be able to the tax system will be flexible towards that side. And productivity is that the tax revenue collected should be utilized or produce measurable progress in the society, or used to make better the welfare of the society. Now, that is talking about the principles of a good tax system. Now, we have certain types and forms of tax. Types of tax. We could have the what? Direct tax and what? Indirect tax. Under forms of tax, that's where we have specific tax, ad valorem tax, okay. Export duties. Now, when we talk about direct, okay, now we look at types of tax, forms of tax, and so on and so forth. Actually, these are, in some cases, these are called the basic types of tax, and some other taxes come under direct tax, some under these forms now come under what? Indirect taxes. Now, but by the time we talk about the direct tax is the type of tax that is charged directly, which and paid directly by the what? By the tax assets, that is the person enjoying or the person that is earning the income. Okay. Now, when we talk about the direct tax, the direct tax could be classified. Of course, we have some types of direct tax. You have what? The personal income tax, the capital gains tax, petroleum profit tax, and so on and so forth. Now, these are taxes that are paid by or generated by certain things and paid by the assets that's generated them. Company tax, company profit tax, they are all examples of company profit tax are examples of direct taxes. But examples of indirect tax, that's what you have with specific tax, which is tax based on the quantity of items. Okay, as individual units of items. But the ad valorem tax is what? The tax that is based on the what? The value of the items that are of goods. Then export duties, import duties, excise, export and import duties, tax based or tax charged on exports, tax charged on imports. Then excise duties are tax paid for the manufacturing or use of local resources. Now, those are examples of types and forms of tax. Now, we shall move on from there and look at national debts. national debt. National debt. National debt talks about the total liability of a country, total amount of debt of a country which is owed to different entities or individuals or governments, both internally and externally. National debts are actually useful in many ways. They are used to finance majorly government projects or to as a major source of revenue in most cases. That is why the nation incurs debts. Now, for instance, that means that what, from the definition, national debts can be classified into what? Internal debts, and external debts. Now, the total amount of liability or debt that is owed by a government of a nation to other entities within the what? Within the country is referred to as what? Internal debt. While total amount of liability or debts or claims of other organizations or entities on the government outside, which are outside the what? The country. That means means that the debt owed to other external institutions or other governments is referred to as external debts. Now, these sources of government or sources of national debt, of course, we could talk about, when you talk about external debts, you could talk about the Paris Club, the IMF, the World Bank. So, when we talk about the whole debts owed by a government to organizations within the country is called internal debts, and those that are owed by country to other government of other countries is also, or other organizations, is referred to as external debts. Now, these are two major divisions or types of national debt. There are also other types. Now, this is based on what? Source. Classification based on source. We have internal and external debts. Based on what? Period or length of time. Period or length of time. We have long-term debts, and we also have what? Short-term debts. I have long-term debts and short-term debts. Now, long-term debts talks about debts that the value, or that are the debts that are incurred that last beyond 5 years. When it lasts beyond 5 years, the duration of the debt lasts beyond 5 years, we call it what? A long-term debt. But a very short-term debt goes within 1 year to 5 years. Usually we normally had the medium term, but now they are both classified as short term. So between 1 to 5 years, well, anything 5 years is called long term. Anything below 5 years is a short term debt. Now, we also have what? Productive and deadweight debts. Now, the productive or reproductive debt is a debt that is incurred in order to finance areas for which can yield more income in future. That means maybe things when you invest in industrialization, when you invest in infrastructural development, then you talk about what? Reproductive debts. Then we have deadweight debt. Deadweight debts are debts that are incurred and invested for what? For into areas that do not reproduce anything. For instance, debts that are incurred to give relief materials to certain people, or that are used to grant donations or assistance, relief or aid to certain states in the country, becomes what? Deadweight debt in the long run. So now this makes up what? This makes up the types of national debts. Now, the reason why what we should ask next is, why do governments actually incur national or public debts? Public debts are actually incurred for certain reasons. We'll list them one after the other. First of all, to finance a balance of payment equilibrium. When there is to solve a balance of payment problem, where there is a disequilibrium or deficit balance of payment, the government borrows in order to do what? In order to finance such disequilibrium or such deficits. Number two, to also finance a deficit budget. The government uses debts to finance deficit budget, like what we have in Nigeria now, where we have a certain budget, but we rely mainly on what? On loans to finance it. And the third one, to provide infrastructural development, infrastructural facilities. That is a third one. We could borrow in order to finance certain capital projects that leads to what? Infrastructure. Then number four, we talk about what? National debt can be incurred in order to what? Provide opportunity, establish industries that will provide what? Employment opportunities and better standards of living. Now, these are purposes of national debt. Now, so I finish this one. I know I don't. Okay, now the last on the list here. Okay, no, two to go. The next one we have what? The budget. The budget. Or public budget. Now, public budget talks about the total. When we look at the whole a statement, when we talk about a budget or public budget, we said what? It is defined as a statement of the expected revenue of the government and the proposed expenditure within a given fiscal year or a given period of time, usually 1 year. The government, in its budget in a particular year, looks at what they can get and what they will use such to do what, or what they want to spend, and how they can get what they will use to what they will spend. Now, in such cases, that means that the budget has a side that is what? Revenue, and a side that contains what? Expenditure. Now, what are the nature of the what? The revenue and expenditure there? The structure of the budget, structure or nature of the budget. Number one is that the budget actually tells us, you have the what? The capital revenue. We have the capital revenue. We have recurrent revenue. We have capital expenditure. And you have what? Recurrent expenditure. Now, capital revenue. The capital revenue is saying we have we talk about whenever we talk about revenue, we are looking at revenue that is sources of income, right? So when we talk about the capital revenue, we are looking at long-term revenue. It's the sources of revenue which the benefit extends for over a period, over the budget period. Example, we have what? Examples of capital revenue, we have what we call what? Foreign direct investments. We have the long-term loans. We have the royalties or licenses given to what? To organizations. That is what? Capital revenue. Then we talk about what? Recurrent. Recurrent revenue include what? Taxes that are charged on regular basis or annual basis to organizations of different organizations. We have fees, fines, we have rents, royalty, and so on and so forth. Like we mentioned earlier, those are recurrent revenue. Then when we talk about capital expenditure, we talk about expenditure which the benefit is what? Long-term in nature. That means it exceeds the planning period. So in this case, the capital expenditure we could look at, we talk about what? Maybe road construction, bridge construction, things on infrastructure. Okay, when we talk, and now, but recurrent expenditure, we say they are what? Expenditure that are what? Short-term in nature, that occurs on regular basis. Example: salaries of staff, maintenance of road, maintenance of infrastructure, and so on and so forth. These are what? The nature of the things that make up the structure of the national budget. Now, the question is, what is the relevance of budget to? What is the relevance of the budget? The budget is actually, number one, is a planning tool that shows the different policy, that gives an idea of the policies which what the government wants to do in the coming fiscal year. Secondly, the budget lists or itemizes the total value of expenditure and total value of what? Expected income. That is total value of proposed expenditure and what? Expected income within the specified period of time. 3 is that the budget determines the rate of economic activities within that period of time. 4 is now that the budget determines whether shows or indicates the nature of the state of the economy, whether it is going to be in fact it shows the goal of the economy generally, whether we are implementing an expansionary policy, or are we implementing a contractionary policy. Now those are the things that the budget shows. Now the budget, types of budget. Now types of budget. Number one, we have the deficit budget. Number 2, we have the surplus budget. We have the balanced budget. Now, the deficit budget or budget deficit is a type of budget used by developing countries and which are used by developing countries and used to rescue countries from what we call recession. Now, the deficit budget is a type of budget where the expected revenue is less than the proposed expenditure, which means that the proposed expenditure is higher than the revenue. So that case, such budget, like we said, is used in case of the recession. Now, to rescue an economy from recession by promoting economic activities through increments in government expenditure. Number 2 is the surplus budget. The surplus budget is a type of budget in which the expected revenue is higher than the proposed expenditure. Now, in such cases, the proposed expenditure, which is less than the expected revenue, means that the economy is trying to adopt a contractionary policy and trying to withdraw more from the people, like getting more revenue. Then in such cases such budget is used during inflationary trends. When you have inflationary trends, then you implement a surplus budget. and use it to do what? To fiscally, through as a fiscal measure to control money in circulation. While the balanced budget is the case of equity between expected revenue and proposed expenditure. On that note, we come to the end of the budget. Now we move to the last topic there on public finance, which is fiscal and monetary policy. Fiscal and monetary policy, generally a policy refers to the deliberate measure of the government taken by the government to actually influence or regulate economic activities of production, demand, and demand. Now, the next stop here is the fiscal and monetary policy. When we talk about a policy is actually a deliberate measure. Is defined as a deliberate measure is defined as a deliberate measure designed to regulate the activities in an economy. Definitely it is carried out by the government or its agencies or authorities or designated authorities. Now, because we have product market and the financial market. The fiscal policy regulates activities in the product market, while the monetary policy regulates activities in the financial or money market. Now, what it means is that both fiscal and monetary policies, they all contribute in regulating of financial administration in in public finance. Now, in fiscal policy here, fiscal policy, like we said, fiscal policy is defined as the deliberate attempt by the government through its agencies to regulate the economic activities of production and demand in the economy through the use of tax and government revenue, that is the fiscal tools. So from that definition, we have tools of fiscal policy. Fiscal policy are what and what now? We have what? Tax and government expenditure. I think we've discussed quite extensively on this topic. So tools of fiscal policy, we have what? Taxation and government expenditure. But the targets of fiscal policy. So the targets of fiscal policy, we have income, consumption, or demand. Of course. Now, by the time it targets this to affect income and demand, or income and consumption and demand, so as to limit what? Production and other economic activities through the use of what? Tax and government expenditure. Now, on the other hand, the monetary policy is defined as the attempt of what? The central monetary authority of the government to regulate the economic activities through the regulation of liquidity within the economy. When we say liquidity, we talk about what? Flow of money, that is money supply. So in other words, monetary policy regulates money supply, and by regulating the extent of liquidity that flows around within the economy. Now, monetary policy tools of monetary policy. We have the tools of monetary policy. We have open market operation. We have liquidity ratio. or cash ratio. We have bank rates or discount rates. Have special directives. We have the what? Moral suasion. And we have selective credit control. These are instruments used by the CBN to control. They are the central bank to control movement of money in the what? In circulation. That is to control amount of liquidity in circulation. We have open market operation, liquidity or cash ratio, which is ratio of cash among the total reserve of a bank, which they are allowed to keep for daily activities. You have the bank rate, which is the rate at which banks are allowed to grant loans or discount bills of exchange. Special directives, which are directives by the central bank to make special deposits into their account. Then the moral suasion is a form of platform that persuades the financial institutions to pursue or adopt or implement a particular policy. While selective credit control talks about financing of certain aspects. That means certain areas that should be granted loans. Now, the targets of monetary policy. Targets of monetary policy. Targets of monetary policy. We have 1, money supply. Money supply, exchange rate, and rediscounting rate. The money supply talks about total money in circulation. The exchange rate talks about the rate at which one currency, local currency exchanges for a unit of the foreign currency. And rediscounting ratio is the minimum rate at which bills are allowed to be discounted. So these are targets and tools of monetary policy. Now, whether fiscal or monetary policy, economic policies could be expansionary, contractionary. When they are discretionary. That means when policies are discretionary, is either they go towards the expansionary side or the contractionary side, or they can be they can be input as automatic stabilizers. Now, what we mean here is that policies could be discretionary or they could be automatic stabilizers within an economy. Automatic stabilizers are policies or mechanisms that are inbuilt into a system that will stabilize it any time that there is an imbalance within the economic system. But a discretionary policy set is a set of variables or policies that are designed to achieve a particular purpose. Discretionary policies could be expansionary or contractionary. Expansionary policies are policies that are designed to increase the rates or the extent of economic activities in an economy by increasing the economic variables. It depends. When we are adopting an expansionary fiscal policy, that means we are trying to increase economic activities. In that case, we are increasing government expenditure or reducing taxation. That means in such cases there will be more money in circulation, there will be increased income and higher demand and higher production. That is for expansionary. But for contractionary policy, the aim is to is to decrease the rate of economic activities. is to decrease the rate of economic activities, and such is the case during what? Excessive inflation, or deflation. And such case, we have the what? We have in such cases, in such cases of expansionary and contractionary, we have is a set of policies that are variables that are aimed at reducing or contracting the rate of economic activities. When we have a contractionary fiscal policy, it means we are increasing the rate of taxation, which means we are taking more from the populace or from the society, and reducing rate of government expenditure, which makes the government to reduce what they put back into the economy. Now, on that note, we've come to the end of the study session on public finance. I know you've been quite enlightened, so the questions will be flowing up on your screen very soon, and in a moment, take a look at them.